I have a cool story about Godot. A viewer of this podcast reached out to me, and what they're doing is they're taking apart World of Warcraft Classic because you have access to the source files, and
Yeah,
they're throwing into Godot, and they're using Claude to do
yeah.
things that they would have always dreamed to have done. And Omar, oh my goodness, he showed me sneak peeks of what they're doing. Like, is the future that you can tear apart any game as long as you have access to the source files and just build another game out of those assets? And like, how are you going to stop millions of people that have access to these tools and AI for very cheap and just start throwing
You
things in and
can't.
start breaking them
And,
apart?
and I'll give you anecdotes of my own. Like, so if you're, there's always the term that people use about the defensibility of a business, and they call it the moat. Like a moat around a castle.
Yeah.
If your moat is software, you're going to fail now because you can point any one of the frontier models, even at an opaque system, and have it figure out how to build the features of that opaque system. I will always say that I'm an engineer before anything else. And along with that, a game developer. I love making games. I've been making games my whole life. I started making games as a kid, early on, and I have very, very deep memories of trying to do that. Um, and then, professionally making games, uh, for decades now. So, yeah, engineer, game developer. Um, and I'm just always fascinated with technology.
So how has like your engineering evolved throughout like your career? Like, obviously, I think you started as an engineer first, but how
Yeah.
has that manifested into different roles?
It's always been the constant sort of thread in my career. Like I've always stayed hands-on in technology, even in leadership roles. Not that I wrote all the code in those examples, but it's always been there. I think what has evolved over time, and in the same way has always been constant, like I'm always curious about new technologies. So my career, when I look back at it, and not consciously going forward, but looking back at it in retrospect, I've always found myself in places of new technology. So I started working on HTML 0.9 when I was still an undergrad. And I built some of the first web services. And then I worked on, and this is going to sound dramatic, I worked on a little file format called MP3 and had some of the first websites that had digital music for download. I used to go to California for the MP3.com conference. We'd have like our fist in the air about music needs to be free. It was pretty
What, the whole
ridiculous.
Napster era, right?
The whole Napster era, like I met all them, Sonic or Sonic, excuse me, and so on and so forth. Justin Frankel from Napster. Um, and that was some heady times. It was in my 20s. It was a lot of fun. But it was, you know, the novel nature of the technology that brought me there. And then later on, I did early mobile when it was about J2ME and Brew, like really difficult ways of making mobile games on closed networks like Sprint and whatnot. Up through mobile where it is today, where it still can be closed, Apple, Google, but interesting. And then so on, like, and now it's, generative AI, and I'm just fascinated by figuring it out and making it work for the things that I love.
So walk me through like the parallels that you saw in your 20s, kind of working on early HTML, kind of getting exposed to the transformation of the music industry and kind of what you're seeing now with AI. Because I feel like I can sense in you is like this excitement for new tech. I mean, I have here my notes and we'll get
Yeah,
into it, like robotics,
yeah,
UGC, among game development and startups. But what
yeah.
is that kind of commonality that you're seeing between what happened maybe in the early 2000s and what's going on now in 26?
So this is a great question, right? And I I like to think I'm a student of history and being able to look backwards to see what's going on forward. There was a very big word that came out of the early digital music days, and it was disintermediation. And it was simply about how a technology would disrupt a value chain and change an industry. So in the case of music, it was we went from having music in a box, which was a controlled part of a value chain of distributors, to having music distributed however you want through the web and then later on through devices. And what really was of issue, even though piracy was the sort of front issue that people brought up, was how it completely turned the value of known mature corporations to being negative value, because now your physical assets are upended by a digital file format. So the example, now is a little more closer to home. It's less about distribution and more about a technology that presumably can disrupt the human resources aspect of value and what people can do and how they can do. And I would argue that much like before, the positioning of that as a topic is what's of issue and not the technology itself. It's in my view, the technology can actually augment and improve the quality of life of people, not replace them. It shouldn't replace them. It can't replace them. And replacing people with tech is a choice. So the analogy I'm making with the past is how the technology rises to a point of contention in a more of a discussion, politically motivated, because of the value that you're trying to retain suddenly being replaced.
It's interesting because I think with the MP3 example, the value chain was like a specific industry, and I think what we're seeing with, I'd say, generative AI, but again, like the massive kind of LLM creators like Claude and Anthropic and OpenAI. This
Yeah.
seems to be like multi-industry facing. Like we're talking like across like many different value chains will get affected by it. But I do completely agree that I think oftentimes we're not looking at it in the correct way because it should augment someone's capability of building something. And I think people are capable of completely reinventing themselves with AI. I don't want to sound
Yeah.
like someone who's just blindly optimistic, but I've seen plenty of people that now have access to these tools that are able to do things that previously weren't able to. And I think that's also the story of the internet. Like, I think every new
Yes.
incredible technology comes through. And I spoke to Glenn Schofield about this, who's also been through kind of AAA games, like from the very start, from cartooning all the way to being a studio head for incredibly large games like Call of Duty. And he said the same. Every time there was a new software to build new characters, everyone freaked out and everyone thought, oh, like now we're not gonna draw things by hand anymore. We're going to lose the soul. And it was really much more about, hey, you're actually capable of doing more now. And kind of people just had to kind of train up and get used to it, I guess.
Right. 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 And it gets, I mean, what gets conflated too is there's absolutely people at leadership positions that are choosing to replace people with machines. It has nothing to do with the machine. Right? It's pretty obvious that the short-term gains of showing better cogs and better profitability with less resource costs is what their objective is, and then in a lot of cases we see that those teams need to get rehired. So we talk about I would argue we need to talk about more of the nuances of the technology itself and what benefits and what negative connotations they bring. But that conversation is independent of the one of people losing their jobs because of other people choosing to let go of them.
I really like how you brought that up. There is this back and
Yeah,
forth right now between, oh, like we're going to fire people because we're going to go more AI. And then it turns out actually that
yeah,
experiment's not working. So they bring them back. And
yeah,
so I think it gets kind of politicized into this thing where like, oh, AI is changing everything. It's like, no, I think there are incentives from companies to cut costs and become more
yeah,
efficient. And that's always been the case
yeah.
in an increasingly capitalist economy. So yeah, I think being able to split those two is really important. How how have you kind of seen AI kind of transform our capabilities? I mean, you kind of saw what the MP3 did in terms of like compression technology to distribute
Right.
music in a way that wasn't possible. Um, how could, if someone who doesn't really understand what AI is doing to games, how would you explain kind of this leap that we're taking?
So for me, and I've helped some studios integrate this exact pattern in their work. For me, it's largely in the engineering realm, though where it extends is in use cases of orchestration, which I'll get to in a second. But immediately, what it does is it makes a person potentially more efficient. And the way I would categorize using AI in this way, and I use this analogy with colleagues and friends all the time, is absolutely have AI do the dishes. Like that thing that's not differentiating that you've done a million times before. Like I was talking to a team just recently about implementing authorization for a game, right? We've done logins with OAuth backed on it, federated logins, Google, Twitch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For a long time, there's nothing interesting about having a team of people do that other than it needs to get done. There's nothing new to create there. Absolutely have AI help you get that done faster. And then when you do it, the sort of methodology I still use when I'm developing with AI, with a coding agent in particularly, is it's like pair programming, at least for me. Like I'm driving in, very pair programming sort of analog. I'm driving, saying what we need to make, and as the coding agent is developing, I'm checking work, I'm accepting work. I'm not just letting it go. In no way whatsoever do I ever go, make me a game. That's that's just, I mean, say that to a seasoned game developer. That doesn't make sense to them, let alone a machine. So so it's very interactive. It's still way faster, and I do believe you approach the, whatever number you want to pick, the multiple of efficiency, and the side of it that we really need to consider, especially in light of, everyone, the mythologies around crunch and overworking people. We should think of this as like giving people back their lives and helping them have a more efficient day so they can go on with their family and their friends and do what they want, and have just a normal 8-hour day, not something more than that. And that's where it's really affected. Beyond that, the other thing outside of coding that's of a particular use case, orchestration is not talked about enough.
Mm.
And by orchestration, I mean those things that are repeatable processes that, we do by nature, like running tests. And typically we have systems where we might write up tests to test a bunch of things. You can have an interactive experience with agents to test based on your test cases, help you write your test cases, and run those all day and all night if you want. So you can have, your continuous integration, continuous deployment with testing, and have AI augment that. You can also have a case where I have a game where I have AI looking at analytics. And, for a live, especially like a free to play game, that's something you're doing all day long to bring back insights to further tweak your game relative to the success of your game. Can have an agent do it, bring it back to your analysts with the top beats, which then influence content creation going forward. Again, there's nothing differentiating about that. Have the machine do it. That saves us time to go do art and let us do the things that are interesting and creative.
So to play devil's advocate, do we think we're outsourcing decision making though? Because look, I work with AI tools all day. Like I'm a co-founder in an AI startup, and like I just know that certain things, when I just kind of get them to like throw it
Yeah.
to Claude, I think after a long day, I'm kind of just being like, all right, tell me what to do, right? I'm tired. Like because these tools push us to do so much often at the same time, or you just take on a workload that
Yeah.
5 years ago was impossible. I find myself so tired that I'm like, look,
Yeah.
just tell me what the question is, or just tell me what the answer is, and that's what. And I'm playing devil's advocate because I'm a huge I'm very excited about what AI can do for the industry, but I do think there needs to be a nuanced kind of discussion about like. I think just the psychology of the people using it and how can we kind of still stay in that driver's seat long term.
Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed, and I'm guilty of this too, is because you start getting into a groove where you're doing more than you ever did before, you do more than you ever did before. And next
Yeah.
thing I know, it's like, why is it dark outside? So, there's still a discipline, much like there would be with or without the machine. It has nothing to do with the machine. Like a discipline of balance, which I'll always argue is the hardest thing in life for me, right? If you ask me what's the most difficult thing in life for you to manage, balance, right? And a balanced person is a person who can, contribute and execute more in all things. And so you have this machine that, makes you feel like a superhuman at some point if you're using it in certain ways. And so why don't I just keep going? And I would say when we talk about giving up agency, the agency you're giving up there is freedom more than anything. And that's something that each of us will just has to be disciplined about. Um, I'm less worried about that I gave up cognitive agency. If anything, I've gotten better and more sort of aware of things. So whereas again, curiosity drives me, to explore a bunch of things. Curiosity plus an agent that helps me explore more things at the same time has been a boon. Like I'm doing more things, even going back to early machine learning days that I haven't done for a while, and seeing like the state of the art now, and being able to do that along with newer notions of generative AI in ways that I would have had to focus on one or the other, and I am able to do more of it. So it's like I have a team of researchers, or a team of coders, or a team of whatever your thing is that you're having your agent do, and that's been great.
Yeah, I think typically in game development, you feel like, especially AAA development, you feel like you're a cog in the machine, right? Like you require
Yeah,
lots of other people to kind of grind their gears with you to be able to create an output. And
yeah,
especially for engineers, but in general, I think product people too, the ability for AI to just allow you to kind of control an entire team, to have the output, be able to iterate quickly. That's magic. I think that's really like one of the addicting kind of facets of it, because in a lot of ways it is addicting because you just want to keep going. I can imagine you
it
with all your
is.
different ideas, like you're just like, I can try this now. I can go back to machine learning. I can.
Right, right. And I keep a sort of digital notepad of ideas that when I write them down, and I sort of have this, and it goes back years now, of like particularly for games, like game ideas I have, and I usually like demark them on difficulty of execution. Like, is this something I can mess around with on my own, or is this like a multi-million-dollar double or triple A type of game? And the funny thing is, going back to the notes, some of these are now lowered because the ability to execute on them or look at them deeper. And so, if anything, my notepad's gotten longer.
Yeah.
Like I got more stuff in there.
I want to go back to what you mentioned just now about balance. If there's one thing I kind of learned, kind of viewing the AAA industry, but kind of actually having been in it, but as in general as a player, I noticed this as well, is that there is a bit of a burnout culture. There is a bit of kind of going as
Yeah,
fast as we can. Number has to keep going up. Studios pushing
yeah,
kind of employees to the limit,
yeah,
cutting costs for efficiency. And like I thought you made a really good point, which is, now with AI, like people should be allowed to get their time back. We should be allowed to be more efficient. But it feels like we're incapable as like an industry to do that. It feels like we get given an alien technology, and we're just going to use it to squeeze people out further, to make people work even faster. And maybe it's not
yeah,
even from the studio level, but even at an individual level, we're wired this way now, because like we just think we have to do more and more and more, when in reality, like we could actually do, like, instead of a 9-hour workday, you could work for 4 hours, get all the work that you would have gotten done in 9 hours, done it properly, with cognition, with decision making, without just numblessly like prompting. And I don't know if we're capable of doing that. I don't know if it's going to take a generation of new people to come
yeah.
in with AI to do that, right? That's, yeah.
Yeah. And even though we might rail against the industry of doing that, there's the larger effect that this is true, like you mentioned. And I think it's, if I recall, it's Jevons paradox, if I recall correctly. And the
Yes,
paradox is
Jevons
simply
paradox. Yeah.
this: Jevons paradox, right? So like we went from like, say, disc to CD to DVD, right? And like, oh, we got all this space, we'll never need more space. And then we fill the rest of the space. Like when you get more resources, even though the idea is that it's more resource efficient, you use up the resources almost immediately. And so at a personal level, oh, I can do more. I should work less. And you work more to do even more. And, you know, again, in all these things, whether you have the greatest tools in the world, you still have to have discipline in your profession, and you still have to execute in a way that makes sense. And there's no magic, sort of button in truly like I don't work. Like you're gonna work, and you should be proud of that, and you should get value out of that. Um, so I, I suffer from this, to be honest again, but I'm reminded by my 3-year-old and my wife every day, and that helpful. And certainly being able to work in my office at home, I have the patter of little feet that remind me all the time, and that brings me back in. So,
Yeah, that's really special.
mm,
Um, how do you see the games industry kind of transforming itself? And when I say industry, I mean like large studios. Like, how do you see this integration with
sure.
AI? Because I feel like it's an awkward dance right now. They don't
It is
really
an awkward
know.
dance.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll speak anecdotally from my experience. Um, there is no argument uh, that everyone is trying AI in some level at every studio and company everywhere. Now, there's certainly holdouts and whatnot, but everyone is attempting to see what they can get out of this, right? Some uh, in some with more rationalized, sort of cogent ways of doing it, and others are like everyone's going to use AI. It's a terrible way of doing it. Where I see it changing is adding to the complexity of things that go, pre-COVID at least, right? So, there's data that suggests that that we actually were on a revenue decline going into COVID as an industry, and then we all blew up and hired more people and grew, and there was a lot of money coming in during COVID because everyone was home and playing games. And we get outside of that, and then there's mass layoffs. That's pre any AI of any consequence that was already happening, right? So there was a correction after COVID. And what came out of that is everyone is resource restraint. There was no longer, free money loans, if you will, the zero interest stuff. And uh, eh, and then suddenly you have to become more efficient. And what has changed, and we've seen it with where AAA releases have diminished year over year, and there's a consolidation of studios and closures of studios, is how we build games has changed. I wouldn't say there's a death of the quality of games. There is the death of, again, that value chain, going back to the analogy of MP3, where an additional thing of a technology has helped to expedite the way we've done games in the past, teams of hundreds of people, hundreds of millions of dollars, multi-year, or even worse, annualized, another version every year, go, 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 go. You can't fail, that kind of thing. Those things are all but dead. And what I'd be surprised about is post GTA 6. And if you think about it, every year we have less of those number of titles every year. And that's just true. Like there should be, in the past there was half a dozen AAA games for the holidays. How many are there this year? And really, how many are we talking about? We're talking about GTA. And the rest that are interesting are all indie games, small studio games, really amazing games done with smaller teams, smaller budgets, without AI, for that matter, right? So these are things that are occurring despite whatever we focus on as the technology cause. Then you add the technology cause, and we haven't even talked about globalization, right? Like then you talk about the difference of costs that are around the world that aren't based on the west coast of North America. These all compound to say do more with less, and then you can start talking about how AI may help you.
So it's kind of like two perfect storms just hit. Gaming industry was already in decline, and then after we got out of that kind of how would you call it, kind of parachute, which was COVID, the gaming industry continued to decline. But at that point, AI came through in 2023, so now all of a sudden, oh, that's the new bad guy. But in
Right,
reality, the gaming industry was already in a tough spot. Like you said, annualized games every year that kind of never really brought much extra value to the user. Call of Duty 6, 7, 8, 9, all that stuff. The fact that you
right,
had so many AAA games that were dishing out $100 million budgets that you don't even see in Hollywood, and they're just not
right.
managing to compete with large forever games or those in the top 10 that aren't moving. And
Right.
yeah,
And then there's more games than ever. And by the way, Discovery hasn't changed since like, the 1900s. Like Discovery is still above the fold on a single web page. If you're not there, you fall off and you get the long tail that goes to infinity. Single biggest problem in the game industry is Discovery, period. Like
Yeah.
and it only gets worse as you add more content and enable the ability to create more content for more people. And no one, like, if we want to fix something, should fix user acquisition discovery.
Talk to me more about that then, because I feel like we're vilifying AI, but that might be the true culprit. And
Right.
I've
Well,
spoke. Yeah.
and my only, and I am, sort of outspoken about this, but where I bring out is, like, it shouldn't be politicized to the level that it is, because it isn't about a machine that's amoral by nature. It's about people that work around the machine making choice decisions. So, you know, relative to distribution, discovery, again, like, even like the latest, sort of app stores, like when you think of like Epic Store, and Fab Marketplace and whatnot, or Epic's Game Store in general, EGS, right? Um, the first thing you see when you go to their game store for third party is their first party games, like
Because they
right at the
controlled the
top.
store. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So, imagine I'm your favorite retailer, and big box retailer, and instead of showing all my sourced goods from all the partners that I have, I show mine in front of theirs first. Right. So that's the first thing that happens there. And then you get one line of top games. It's the same top games. Um, and it's largely, when I joke around that it's like the 1900s, what I'm saying is discovery is like a web-based, like, carousel of endless choices that when you're off the page of the carousel, you are not discoverable. And then if you're lucky, there's some search with certain tags that then are exploited by others. Real discovery today is all influencer marketing, with people with their own wide networks that they can take advantage of. Or if you happen to be, like King, or, some big publisher that you have a network of users that you can retarget, that's the only efficient discovery today. Um, you know, this when I think back on my early days of music, discovery, this is another entertainment form, but discovery evolved and was largely fixed, that eventually became about tastemakers and playlists. So now, like, if you're on like Spotify or whatnot, and you have your social network of connections, you might discover music from other people that way. There was also, again, uh, uh, recommendation engines, which were largely AI based on data, that help people discover things. We have almost none of that in games. We fix that, and the games industry is in a much better place.
So in a lot of ways, streamers were kind of our saving grace from this distribution problem. We're not streamers, but in general, people who are able to the internet, like communities, YouTube channels. Like the reason that Chameleon game just went viral is
Yeah,
because you have a lot of content creators just like putting the stick figure and drawing it on the wall and making it really fun.
100%.
And
Yeah,
and without that,
absolutely. It's a great game. Yeah,
we're stuck with the walled garden, if not like, or walled
yeah,
gardens, because if you're Steam, if you're Epic, if you're whoever,
right.
you own the platform, you get to choose. How do we solve this then, like objectively, is it up to the consumer to like boycott? Because obviously the publishers that own the walled gardens, they're not going to change it because it's in their interest.
Right.
Consumers feels like they don't have, from my point of view, the consumers don't feel like they have a lot of power. They're looking for the best deal, rightfully so, because games are expensive. How on earth do you combat such an issue? Does it become a technology thing? Like streaming was directly went against or not even streaming, but the MP3 went against the idea of a CD, because now you can transport music into over the internet, right? So
Yeah.
that was an innovation technologically that allowed to go past what used to be that walled garden. So I'm wondering, is it an innovation thing that is required?
So, first, I have no idea, right? Like, I have
Of
like
course,
a bunch of
yeah.
ideas
We're
how to
here for
fix it.
opinions. Yeah.
I mean, I do have concrete ideas of how to fix it. And again, trying to be a student of history, when you look back, like the MP3 thing, or even farther back, the idea of like the printing press and how we got novels. The whole Charles Dickens story was he had pamphlets in his hand that he was handing out his stories on Victorian street corners, and those pamphlets became chapters, and that's how the novel was born, thanks to the printing press. Like, that's a distribution story, and you can continue that story, throughout history. Like, the 30-minute sitcom is about 20 something minutes of content, so you can sell 8 minutes of advertising. If there's something I've learned historically, is distribution defines content, period. Like,
Ah.
I can be very high-minded about my art. I love making games. I love being creative. Distribution defines content because it is how it contains content to move to the masses, and then the business models around it. So the business models for traditional distributors, by the way, is not what's in the box. It's how many boxes they can make of 3 or 4 different sizes. So when you think of like a, like a FedEx or UPS, it's about, this size box, this size box, this size box. They founded the music industry, and they had, the single play, the long play, later on CD, DVD. That's how they got efficiencies and how they made money. Arguably, they didn't care what was in the box. They they optimize for how many boxes they can move. So how do we fix distribution today? How do we move content to the masses? I think about that and how it is largely been in the past via technology. And what's going on today with influencing marketing, influencer marketing, and around social media is attention hacking, right? Like that is what it is. It's, you know, people have so much time. If you think of attention as a resource, so how do I get slivers of that attention away from TikTok to my thing? And there's something there about the back and forth that we see, I think, by example, where, you know, you know, an influencer or influencers put the chameleon game online, and there's a sort of like feedback loop of that. It's also very shareable. So it goes back to the influencers who then promote more people to go to the game, who then promote more content from the influencers. I worked on a game called Dead as Disco. Shout out to that team. They're amazing. The game is awesome. That game is so shareable that it just blew up immediately with like zero marketing spend. Because what do? You like melee combat to the beat of music, doing these cool martial art dance moves, and it just immediately snackable, shareable bites from it, which then goes out to social media, which then pushes more people in to push more content out. There's something about that for sure. Um, how we can do that in more democratized ways that have meaning and bring value to users that don't fund another $100 billion ad network, on its own. I don't have the answer. I have some ideas, and I think about working on that, to be honest. Like, I love making games, but someone should get the Nobel Prize if they fix distribution. Like, it's a big deal.
Here's what scares me. It
Yeah.
feels I don't want to say race to the bottom because I feel like that's very negative, but I haven't played the disco game you just mentioned. What was it called again? Just
Dead as Disco.
Dead as Disco. And the only thing
Amazing
that
game.
I imagine so. The only thing that scares me is that when we start building games because of distribution, right? Like we start tweaking games so they're attention grabbing and they
Yeah.
have certain then all of a sudden all games in order to be successful have to be like that. And I think that goes against the very notion of it being an art where people just try to create the best game possible, not for the vehicle of distribution, but because it's a fun game. And I know I
Yeah.
sound kind of idealistic, but and I don't want to go against people that do it that way because maybe that is the way right now in order
Yeah.
to make a game successful. But it is kind of it's kind of sad a little bit that we have to make games for attention hacking, right?
I agree. I don't think you have to do it. I think the realization of running a successful business in an industry as it's defined today, it becomes a practical
That's
requirement that you
the
have to do.
requisite. Yeah,
Right. That said, there are still people that collect vinyl records,
true.
right?
I do.
And
Yeah.
maybe the outcome of this are bespoke games like you talk about that you can just find on somebody's website, in the same way the record store on the corner that still has vinyl records that survives this. And I hope so. Like, just to, put a fine point on what you're saying. Um, I still today will talk about my fondness and memories around MMOs I've played in the past. And those MMOs that are like hundreds of hours with large communities going to fight the big bad in these instanced dungeons and building castles and houses and all this stuff. and some of that exists in a form or in different forms today, but largely no one would make an MMORPG of that caliber because of the cost to do so and the requirements of attention to try to take people away from, you could argue that a modern MMO is actually Roblox, right? Or as other people are now calling it, metaverse, to get people off that platform to play your amazing, MMO, is not a, you know, profitable enterprise in of itself. If you do it for the love of the game, and I encourage people to do it for the love of the game, that's awesome. But you have to have your eyes wide open about the realization of that. Like, how can I play my punk music? I have a punk band. I want to stay punk for life. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, and stay profitable.
Yeah.
I think that's the tension with gamers is that they're seeing a lot of their favorite franchises, titles. They just see, I think the higher ups taking decisions, and then obviously the devs have to comply, and they're thinking, why you're hurting the game, and it's like, well, like the industry has changed, the competition is fiercer, the
Yeah.
attention required for this game to be profitable, and also just the costs. Like I spoke to Jack Emmert, who did City of Heroes and a bunch of other games or MMOs,
Yeah.
and he said that
Great
today
game.
the cost of building games is insanely high compared to what it used to be. So it's like
Yeah.
even if you wanted to keep the same bar, it's like it's way more expensive. And like, are you going to get that return on investment with everything that's changed in the industry that we're discussing here? And
Right.
that's such a can of worms that it's very hard to just kind of cast one kind of spell and say let's fix this and everything gets fixed. It's a whole
I mean, it's amazing, right? We'll again focus on one particular technology, but the cost of making games, despite that technology, which presumably would help us save money, keeps going up. And you can see these, in the larger tech context of technology, right? Like if you go try to buy the latest RTX card right now, you're in for $6,000-7,000 a card. Like a lot of this outrage on the Steam box going at 1,400, and I think it's rightfully so that they're like $1,400. What are you talking about? But you couldn't even get a graphics card for that right now, right? And the traditional business, and there's a discussion about this that I was sort of shortly on online. There's the traditional push of hardware, next gen on console, phones every year or whatnot, pushes the supports an ecosystem of software that requires that hardware, and then you keep cycling it and the costs keep going this way all the way down to the users, right? Could we still make games on existing Xboxes and PlayStations that are awesome? Yeah, like
for
of
sure.
course we can, right? So why do we need another next gen box? Because it pushes the growth of the industry predicated on hardware and software changing over time. And, the artifact of that is deprecation of the stuff you already have. So you buy your latest iPhone and it's already obsolete in 12 months,
And that
right?
is the
Like,
foundation of games, right? Like that's what I grew
right,
up remembering about games. It's like all about the graphics. Like every new game would be
right.
like the first thing you'd pay attention to is how does NBA Live '04
Yeah,
look better to '05? And yet you'd hyperfixate on that. And no one kind of people would talk about the features, but we
right,
were so obsessed with graphics. And
right.
I've spoken to quite a few people, and now we've kind of going like we're doing a U-turn on that, and it's much more about
Yeah,
kind of social features. And the next generation gamers don't give a crap about graphics, and
right. Right,
it's
I think
it's
that's true. What would still sustain that artificially though is those studios that work on those games get that hardware before it's released, usually multi years beforehand, so that their next cycle of game requires that hardware. So when the game comes out, you have to buy that for the best hardware. You have to buy that graphics card. You have to get more memory. You have to and that's the cycle that pushes the growth of the industry. So there is a pushback, I think, particularly on costs, given you know socioeconomic constraints of uh, you know I have this sort of sense as a player. I might have this sense of sunk cost and skin in the game in these forever live games like a Roblox or Fortnite or whatever, getting me to leave that in light of something new with additional costs to get me on a new ramp of costs is a big that's a difficult thing to do, particularly from a marketing standpoint. So that's where the pushback is now, and then that pushes back all the way across the value chain again of all these companies making these games. So how you make it gets affected to reduce that cost. That's like the simplest thing you can do. But also these new players, particularly younger players, they're okay with the fidelity that they're getting on these platforms and what they value. And I've talked about this a lot too. They value agency, immediacy. They want it, wherever they are, in whatever device they're handing, and they're not going to wait for a download, and they want to feel like they're part of it. And everyone, for at least a generation of or not more, we've told everyone that they're all creators. They all can make on every platform exists, whether it's a YouTube or it's a video game in a place like Roblox. Um, all their friends are going to be there immediately, and you can just stay and have fun. Or here's the next Xbox or the Steam box, and you got $1,400 to drop on that, right? You're like 15, you know. So
In no way.
right, right.
It's crazy. It's
Anyways,
crazy when you say when you say it that way. It's absolutely nuts. Like the amount of money
right.
we're expecting young
But
people to dish
but
out.
at the same time, I have a slightly older son who manages to get me to give him like $50 here and there for for Robux. And that drip, he gets me to give him more money all the time on it. And I don't think, well, I don't know. We might have passed $1,500 a long time ago, but as a utility, that seems to be more approachable.
Yeah, it's drip fed. It's not like one massive purchase, like one new console. It's like, hey, I just kind of want to get more value out of a free game, and so let me just. I mean, this has
Right.
also existed when I was a kid. I remember Club Penguin. I don't know for anyone
Oh,
listening, but like
great
Club
game.
Penguin was such a big deal. I remember
Yeah.
my sister wanted to get at all costs. She wanted like some penguin dollars so she could go in and build her house and everything.
Yeah.
And like that hasn't really changed. Like that was a free game that people came in. Yeah, there was some kind of premium paywalls, but like you would still like that model has just become more popular. It just feels like it's just like I don't know if you've seen True Detective. Like time is a flat circle, man. Like we're just
Yeah.
oh here
Great
we are.
show. Yeah.
We're back at
Yeah.
this again, man. Like it's not like we're. I'm wondering what the true innovation is, and the only reason I get well, not the only reason, but I think the biggest reason why I get so excited with AI is like maybe this forces some incredible change out of what I see as a very frustrated industry right now, like an industry that just people just want to I think employees are scared. I think owners or executives are trying to squeeze out. I don't mean this negatively. I don't want to paint a broad brush, but in general, like it just feels like these large companies are more interested in kind of making money than it is in building great games. And it doesn't reflect on the rest of the chain, but I can't help but feel that way for a lot of different game titles. And
That that's absolutely true.
yeah,
That
it's
that
not, and
is
it's
true. That's
why
not
should I be scared to
shading
talk
anything at
about it,
all.
right? Yeah, no, but I genuinely
Yeah.
like you feel it. You feel it like where it's like everyone's just trying to like lightly like not touch each other's toes, but that is the situation. Why can't we just be more transparent about it? We live in a capitalist economy. There are
Right.
private equity owners that buy game companies and then just want to sell it to the next one, and
Right.
we're deluding ourselves in like all this advertising about oh like we're such a we care so much about the community, we care about so much about the game. It's like yeah you do, but like actions speak louder than words, and the
Right.
actions just aren't really showing up in that direction for me.
Right. Right. Absolutely. We should be clear eyed about that. And again, that goes back to my point about what we should be discussing. And it's not about presumably artificial intelligence doing any of that or making these executive decisions. It is about executives who, more generally, if you're an officer of a company, particularly the chief executive, your one job is to make the company profitable, right? It, I can appreciate, sort of you know, these ideas of people coming together and we're a family. You're a company and you're supposed to be profitable. And we should have that in mind when we talk about these things. And we should absolutely rail for the representation of people at these companies. But the idea that you didn't know that that was their goal beforehand, you should know that was their goal beforehand, with or without AI or any other technology. That's what they're going to do. I think they're making poor decisions relative to AI for a short-term gain on the market, which at the expense of a long-term, longevity of a company. But these things are self-evident. If you're the CEO, you're supposed to be making a company profitable.
Yeah. Would you be able to hypothesize what a successful utilization of AI would be in a games company? Like, what would that look like? Because just for context, from my perspective, we've been trying to do like a B2B kind of AI workflow for companies, right? Like, that's what Microsoft Copilot kind of tried to go for. It's like, hey, everyone can
Sure.
use AI. It's very gated.
Yeah.
You can use these
Yeah.
great tools, and it kind of flip-flopped. And then Anthropic obviously came in with the coding, and then Codex followed. But for a game studio, what does kind of ingestion of AI from community managers to the game developers to the managers and the middle managers, et cetera, what does using AI actually could look like? Like, what would it actually look like in the next 5 years?
So the way I would do it, and we largely did this in free to play games, going all the way back to social games on Facebook, and Zynga really made this sort of a big development process. You should have a portfolio of ideas that you're trying and quickly testing them and killing them when they're not going somewhere. And that's largely a data driven thing. You could also, I wholly believe in a combination of data driven analytics and player testing, like live players. But instead of your one shot game, and studios need to be able to do this, instead of I put all our eggs in this one game and no one saw it until just, some pre-release, which is a terrible idea nowadays, particularly when attention hacking is how you're going to get users. You should have 5 or 6 ideas, make smaller games, iterate stronger, race them, kill the ones that aren't incrementally moving your metrics, and then focus the ones that are doing well and start over. And that, again, we did that in free to play, mobile and particularly knows this. There's a million people way better at this than I am. I ran a studio, or helped run a studio at Eastside Games here in Vancouver that we did this. We were awesome at it. And it's resource intensive, to support that many things, but at smaller scale. Where you can use technology to augment that is in that, again, orchestrating data analytics, bringing about that data, running those tests quickly, for identifying players that can play that and bringing back the data relative to that and making choice decisions. That's how development has to move going forward. Um, you, we all think we have a great idea for a game, including me. Execution's everything. And managing execution relative to costs. You should treat it as a portfolio the way an investor would, and have a lot of bets, smaller scale and costs, and try to manage a portfolio where you're getting X% back across. That's how I would do it. And
I mean,
have done that in previous studios.
in the words of Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan to get punched in the face, right? So
Yeah.
you think you're building the great game and you think everything's going on track, and then all of a sudden people don't care or it doesn't do the right numbers, and now you're panicking. I think for someone listening that doesn't really know what it means to prototype games in AI, like, what's your setup? What's your approach? Just paint the picture of, like, because I see loads of cool stuff on your LinkedIn where you got like
Yeah.
agentic NPCs moving around and like you're in
Yeah.
these worlds. Like, what does it mean for someone that like really wants to get into it? Maybe they're just in high school now and they're thinking, maybe this is my time to actually try AI game development because this is where the
Yeah.
industry's heading. Who knows?
Yeah, those are more technical tests and prototypes. So there's 2 distinct things here. On the one case, like I just, recently, the agentic NPCs, which is based on some tech I developed, that largely MCP servers that allow agents to go into a game and manipulate the game. In this case, Unreal Engine. That's a little more concrete, but a lot of these things I put out are technical tests. Like more recently, during Unreal Fest in Chicago, Epic's conference every year, NVIDIA showed off their latest AI powered plugins, including a speech recognition plugin. And I'm like, oh, let's see where that's come. runs locally on the machine. It doesn't go out to cloud. It's uh, milliseconds quick. So, when you're working with a lot of AI, especially agents, you type something, has to go back to the cloud and back, and could take some time. I wanted to test how quick this is, and it's like that. And
Wow.
and I'm running it on an old machine, and I would talk like this, and it would largely get it right. And then, even when it didn't, that would go back to an agent that then could get the meaning out of it because the agent's trained on language. So I was trying to connect two disparate AI models and to see how well it worked fabulously. Now, if I were going to take that tech demo into a prototype, what am I prototyping as a game? So I have this idea for a game. It's just to use something simple. It's an RPG. And in the RPG, there's this living world of people, and they give quests, and, you discover story beats through the quests, a branching narrative that comes together every so often. So you get the illusion of choice, but you're carrying people forward along the storyline. So you can get to the end where you're super heroic and you do something amazing. Could we involve this technology to, give a new control surface, like your voice, for example, and as well as bring in intelligence to help support the narrative? Maybe that would be a prototype. And I would prototype that around a quest giver giving out a quest and see how that feels, and test it with people and see how they like it. And there's this notion of a vertical slice where you have some amount of gameplay that you want to test with players. And usually there's sort of a full kind of, experience there that comes back. Like, you did something to get something, to earn something, to go and do it again. And you have these, like, game design loops that you go through. That would be prototyping.
Yeah.
Um, Largely what I put out, I sometimes I put prototypes, but largely I put out these tests to show, hey, this thing everyone is talking about, here's what it really does from the viewpoint of an engineer. When I started doing this, like 2-ish years ago, it was exactly that. I was skeptical, but I wanted to do what presumably is my profession and not take anything secondhand, but use my ability as an engineer to do due diligence on platforms and technologies. And I did just that. And I keep doing that to show what is interesting and profound. Of late, local agents have really come around, and that's good. That's clearly going to be a direction in the future for all of us. You control your costs, all your data is locally, not giving it a cloud. That's beautiful.
And what about all this stuff with Unreal and like its hooks into AI? Like I've heard in the news, I think I've seen on LinkedIn, but I think for someone listening, like you can start using
Yeah.
Unreal and AI now.
Yeah, so Unreal 6, and I haven't used this feature yet, shipped with its own MCP server, much like the one I've created for Unreal 5, in all versions of Unreal 5. Um, it largely gives you access to things in the editor, and it's editor only, so it's not runtime. That's an important distinction. I've built stuff for runtime that can run in a game. This is for in editor to manipulate, all the different graphs, so like Blueprint, Niagara, etc. Um, you can do coding, of course. There's a demo they did that I watched where it was leveraging their PCG, their procedural content graph, to build landscape and towns and stuff, which is something I'm passionate about and use. That's powerful. Um, and it ships natively with UE6.
It's incredible. Like I went to for context, like I went to this conference called Gamebridge. It's like a competition for university students who are building their own games, and I was really lucky and privileged to be one of the judges for this competition. Not that I'm
Oh,
some
cool.
kind of critic of game art, but it was just a cool opportunity to go and see what kind of kids and students are building. And I couldn't help but like reflect on it back now and think like, imagine if all these game developers with their incredible ideas just were able to hook up to Unreal and just like you said, like you have like a team of people around you that can do things at a really high level. You just need
Yeah.
the idea and the execution. And I just think the quality of the individual creator in the next, I don't want to say 5, 10 years, whatever arbitrary number of years that can indicate progress. But I'm so convinced that people are going to start coming out with insane demos and insane
Yeah.
concept ideas because they've been able to leverage these things that you're saying about what Claude can do when it's hooked up to Unreal.
Yeah, and I think we've seen some of that already, and particularly again, how do you get people to see that? Like there are a smattering of things that have been happening that are brilliant, and I really like what I'm seeing on web games and using technologies like 3GS and Godot. Going back to your point about access for students, and anyone can download Unreal Engine. You can even get the source code. It's totally free. Like you don't pay anything uh, up to the first $1 million of revenue. That's an amazing, you know, if you that's great if you have that issue that you have to pay
Insane. Yeah.
off $1 million revenue, and then it's like 3% if you put it on the game store, on the Epic Game Store. That's amazing to support independent developers. Um, I would encourage people to try it. I think if you're really into um, I'm passionate about using Unreal Engine, but I think another approach relative to using agents as well as for coding agents and whatnot, using something that's natively text based, like web technologies like 3GS or Godot as an engine, lends itself better than Unreal Engine or Unity that still largely has a lot of binary assets that are opaque. Like the server, the MCP server I made, a lot of the stuff it does internally is to take those binary assets, turn them back to text before it goes back to the agent,
Yeah.
and that's why it works so well, because it can still read it. The UE Insights, as an example, is a tool that profiles your code, reads and writes in binary. I just created another reader writer that sticks it out in test, and now my agent can profile my entire game for me. What would take a person a lot of hours, just does it in minutes.
I
That's
have a,
great.
I have a cool story about Godot. A viewer of this podcast reached out to me, and what they're doing is they're taking apart World of Warcraft Classic because you have access to the source files, and
Yeah,
they're throwing into Godot, and they're using Claude to do
yeah.
things that they would have always dreamed to have done. And Omar, oh my goodness, he showed me sneak peeks of what they're doing. Like, is the future that you can tear apart any game as long as you have access to the source files and just build another game out of those assets? And like, how are you going to stop millions of people that have access to these tools and AI for very cheap and just start throwing
You
things in and
can't.
start breaking them apart? You
And
can't.
I'll give you anecdotes of my own. Like,
Yeah, please.
so if you're, there's always the term that people use about the defensibility of a business, and they call it the moat. Like a moat around a castle.
Yeah,
If your moat is software, you're going to fail now, because you can point any one of the frontier models, even at an opaque system, and have it figure out how to build the features of that opaque system. And now with open systems, like I've had, so I get hired to work on a lot of different games for different studios and development teams, and one of the things that I'll do or have done, totally above board with the client, is in order to ramp up quickly in the project, I'll have an agent look at the entire source and give me a breakdown.
insane. I mean,
And I've had Claude read a white paper, an academic white paper with no code, and implement the algorithm. Complex algorithms. So if you think about it there, right, licensing notwithstanding, you can recreate just about anything you can visually see really quickly. That's just true today. That's not tomorrow. That's not years from now. And you can do it. There's people recreating whole SaaS systems. Like they created their own Monday or whatever your favorite organizational tool is. I've seen, people like you're saying, like I'm going to recreate WoW, or I'm going to recreate, like you can just do that. What that doesn't solve for the industry, by the way, what AI doesn't solve for the industry is discoverability. So let's say you make the coolest game, whatever that game is. How do you get users? We're still back to that.
I mean, if a game's truly good, grassroots, it'll grow, right? Like,
I
I think
absolutely believe you should make a good game first. But that said,
you still
if
need to
your
distribute.
if your strategy is strictly make a great game, and you just expect, the whole build, the whole Field of Dreams thing, you build it and they'll come, that's a formula to lose. You have to do some sort of outreach. And, and typically now it's, you either, if you're going to create your own channel of content for that, then you have the additional issue of getting users to your channel, something I'm sure you are very well aware of, or you partner with those that have networks of users.
Yeah. I mean, let me play devil's advocate for a sec, because so many great
Yeah.
games, and I'd say entire genres, were built because of a creator who utilized assets or some kind of creator mode within a game to make a new genre. So I point to Ice
Yep.
Frog creating Dota. I point
Yep.
to uh, kind of battle royales like PUBG, or even just like we go way further back and you have like people breaking apart Half-Life and just making new games out of it. I almost want to argue, like, I feel like if you're going to get a bunch of people just using Claude and Godot to go into old forever games and just breaking them apart and making better games out of them, or not better games, but fresh takes on games that maybe those studios don't have the commercial appetite to take that risk, but a single kind of game developer, maybe with a team of developers, gets together and they just do it themselves out of pocket.
Yeah.
I can see like all of a sudden, like Blizzard freaked out because the MOBAs came out of nowhere because one guy called Ice Frog built Dota, right?
Right.
And like we said, time is a flat circle. Like history does repeat itself.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if with all these AI tools, just this whole thing repeats itself again. But this time you can't stop it. There's no stopping with
Right.
AI. It feels like, I don't know,
Right.
maybe I'm
Well,
wrong.
for sure, we'll have more cycles of new tech causing new disruption and new evolution of everything. That just will keep coming. Like being a nerd,
Yeah.
a tech nerd and an engineer, and to a large degree, I love physics. Quantum computing is not something we fully realized. That's going to do
Oh
some
yeah.
stuff. But going back to your point, like if you think of like Dota, it took advantage of a community of interest around the original game. So it didn't do it without attention at all. It got all the attention because it was really cool. And then it became official. So it wasn't that they just copied a game. They did it within a community of interest by people that were interested in game. That became viral because of that community. Not accidentally so.
Yeah, you
Now,
learn a
I
lot.
still think, to your point, that, if I can build anything, let's just say it that way. And there's plenty of friends, I'm going to get plenty of heat from other game developers and designers about how dismissive I may sound about this. But if the tools further democratize content creation in the same way that a web camera and a website allowed anyone to create videos and film at scale and distribute to the world, a la YouTube, a la TikTok or whatever, if that keeps happening in all other UGC platforms relative to games, you're going to get more and more content. And we could argue, the quality, the fidelity of all that content, but you're going to get more content. That adds to the problem, not helps the problem of discoverability. So, and I would say you should try and build more games from a de-risking standpoint and try to find an audience. You're just going to have a plan too that is more than just making the game. Like making the game becomes from a resource standpoint the least part of the investment in bringing a game to success as a product. That's true whether or not you're using AI today. Like the marketing budget for GTA 6, which I don't know what it is, I am very sure it's the majority of the budget for the game, not part of the budget of the game or the smaller part of the game. It's the larger part of the budget of the game.
Really, I would have thought. I mean, not to get in on it, but I think Rockstar already has like Rockstar's barely said anything about GTA most of the time. Like I'm sure they've done some marketing, but you don't see like immense billboards and loads of teasers about what's going to happen. Like there's just very kind of, they select their moments and
Yeah.
it
Yeah, they're
kind of
pretty good about
markets
that.
itself, right? Okay,
Yeah, I'm sure it's all about the drive time around the holidays. So we'll see what happens
we'll
as we
see
get
there.
closer to the
Yeah,
end of the year,
fair.
right? But, pre-orders was, what's the date today? Today
Oh,
is
it's
the
tomorrow. It's
20.
tomorrow. It's the
Yeah, tomorrow's
25th. Yeah, yeah,
pre-orders.
yeah.
Okay. You're going to pre-order $80 or $100. And if you go physical, you get a box with a QR code in it or some sort of code in it. And that's starting now for release in November. I think it was November, right? Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to see some marketing from here until then. That's amazing. It's amazing that pre-orders are still a thing in general, but that's happening. And
Yeah.
By the way, I want them to be terribly successful. I'm going to buy probably day one. I haven't pre-ordered anything for like, I don't know how many years, but I will be buying the game.
Yeah, likewise. Likewise. I mean, there was a conversation that GTA 6 is like the last major AAA game to be built the way it was built. That they're saying that moving forward, um, game development's gonna be very different. I don't know if what your take isn't on that, but
Well, like we were talking about, and I agree, and we can see that there's been less AAA releases year over year for years now, and I again I'll discern between quality. We'll continue to have high quality games of all different fidelity, all different quality levels, but how we make a AAA game, I would argue, yes, going forward. I don't even know if Rockstar will do it the same way again, even with the success of this game. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be really successful. I don't know if that argues to continue to do it that way or not. Who knows? Maybe they will. There'll definitely be less players doing that. I mean, and you can see that everywhere. Like you can even see with the new CEO of Xbox talking about, how they're going to change and how they need to change and, what that means for the company. And then the continued consolidation of what's left of AAA. And then, the obvious problems with the publishers that are staying independent. And Ubisoft has been shown to, been losing revenue steadily year over year, and what they've had to do with layoffs to consolidate and their costs and to move forward. Yeah.
yeah. So, what really excites you for the future, Omar? Like, what's getting you going? I mean, we've talked about so much. You mentioned quantum. I don't know if that's something you want to touch on, but what
I
what
yeah.
gets you excited?
And I'm no expert on quantum computing. I just know that's it's potentially a very big thing. What gets me excited, I think again, indie games continue to be important, whether or not it independence. I consider myself independent, whether we get enough support or attention from the industry. But you can see it when we look at the number of releases of games over the last few years. The majority are indie games that, you know, a Balatro comes out and wins Game of the Year. Like that's been shown worldwide, particularly from countries in Asia. I think I'm excited about seeing new games from disparate groups of people from around the world. With high bars of quality and fun, and that'll continue. Um, I worry about the Western developers and their opportunities to continue, and what that means to make games in North America in particular. Um, but I'm excited about those games. I'm excited about the work that I've been doing, and I continue to be curious in all these things. And that's the one thing that guides me through all this is what's that doing over there? I should check that out.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tease quantum quickly before we go? Could you just please?
Well, I
I
mean,
can't not ask about it. We said it twice. I gotta.
so I'll give the total layman physics nerd sort of ground truth that understand the whole point of quantum is it takes advantage of probability, the superstate or superposition of particles. The idea they can be more than one thing at one time. So that means I can compute in parallel in a way that you can't do in traditional ways. So the idea again is it's faster, right? So if you marry this ability again with, you know, LLMs or whatever the future will hold, that's going to be. I, I think I think when people talk about, you know, a 2027 or a 2029, these dates about like, we hit sort of this asymptote, this wall of we don't know what's going to happen. Oh, the machines are going to take over or whatever else. I think what's clear what happens is technology continues to move so quickly that it's basically impossible for anyone to keep up anymore in understanding what is the nature of that technology. It's not that it becomes sentient and then decides to hit the button and we all die. It's that it just evolves so quickly that we are unable, just as people, to understand what's going on in the machine. And whereas earlier, again, think of history, when you think of like the change from an agriculture or agribusiness culture to the Industrial Revolution, that affected people's lives over generations. And that there are books written about how, that caused so much disruption. And then when you think about the computing age, largely starting in the 80s into the 90s, about how in a person's career, like people older than my generation had to go back to school to learn computers. I'm going to school to learn computers so that they could stay in their career. And now you go to, and that's over the course of a career. And now you go like, I invite everybody when they relaunch, say like uh, uh, Claude Code, for example, look at the release number every day. It moves by like tens. Like it'll be say 1 dot, whatever it is now, 1.48.20. Next time I go in and I'm in and out all day long, it suddenly dropped to dot 40. And it's not because they decided to skip numbers. They're just releasing, and a lot of companies, Facebook is famous for that. They're doing iterative releases of new stuff every day while keeping the systems up. AI is evolving at this pace that is changing constantly and will update constantly to the point of hitting a scale that we cannot understand it anymore because it's just changing. It's morphing way too quickly for us to keep up. I believe that'll happen. And I believe that happens like, within a couple of years.
Well, you've just answered my question, which I've had before even our conversation here, which is why do I have to constantly update Codex and Claude? So now I know. Thank you, because I'm constantly getting updates
Yeah.
over and over. But yeah, Omar, it's thank you so much, man, for the conversation,
Yeah.
and it's been an absolute blast. I'll take you up on Quantum for games at some point. I'll have
You
to.
heard it here.
I
Yeah.
will. I will. I'll absolutely explore that. But yeah, thanks for coming on the show. We should definitely do this again.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I loved it.